Hey everybody, it's Professor Diffley. This is Philosophy 255. This is Chapter 8, Lecture Video 4. So we left off last video on this slide, search about, about the code and searching for client info online. So again, this is code section 1.07, subsection Q. So I guess one question would be what would be the reasons to search out a client online, to go gathering, to Google them, to sort of stalk them, in the sense of trying to find out what you can. I think it would be many would be belief that their client is lying to them about who they are, what they're doing, that sort of thing. Which are legitimate concerns. Some clients, just like anybody, may lie to you. Some folks will do that, and others, but that's, I think, part of the job is knowing when people are, and, going online and finding that as sort of evidence to use against them is, morally ambiguous at best. I would also argue it's probably I'm hard pressed, quite honestly, to find these compelling professional reasons and where it would be appropriate to do this. The rule I would give you is avoid it. Don't do it. If you wanted to get the client's consent and do it, that would be a little different. I would make sure it's in writing. I would make sure it's very clear on why you're going to find this information online, what you'll be looking at, how you'll be doing it, and what would the consequences be. You'd have to draft that very well. So that there's a lot of chances for bias in there. The counter, some have said, well, your clients can look for you. Yeah, they can. It's different though. You're not, you're not a patient, so to speak. That's different. It'd be like a review of anybody. This is why I've talked about before is being very careful about what you post online, in social media and things like that, how things can appear, or, be used against you in certain ways, or just even what you say could create barriers with your clients. But yeah, again, I would say just don't do it. You want a hard and fast rule. Don't search your clients online. Just don't do it. So that's where I stand on that one. So a little bit more here about digital and online information. So this is the High-Tech Act here. It's similar to HIPAA in the sense of, that there need to be protections. But this is really about if you do have a breach of privacy, so someone gets into your systems, something like that, you need to give notice of these, and this is true pretty much everywhere. This is you'll see the news, like when a company gets hacked, their credit card information. Companies are actually hacked all the time. Just as a side note on this, I actually did a little background in legal side of this. Companies are hacked all the time. It depends on what the hackers get. So this is why you don't hear about it all the time. It's only when they get this, protected health information, demographic, identifiable information, or other stuff like that, financial information, do they need to announce it. So when would a company be hacked? Things like that, looking for secrets, that sort of thing. But yeah, you would need to inform them. Why? So they can protect themselves. Just like if you have had an identity issues, stolen, they need to tell you so you can protect yourself. So you can't just hide it, which as some people will try to do, because it can look bad on them, having been hacked or having these privacy breaches, but you need to inform your clients. And that's really the key takeaway from this one there. Breaches of client information, again, 1.07. Here we're in subsection N. Again, this continues this idea of notification. If there's going to be a breach of any confidential information, again, you still need to inform your clients in a timely manner, and that's often one that's open for interpretation of what do we mean by timely, how timely, that sort of thing. But again, a key point here is you should have all these policies and procedures created before a breach happens, right? Again, so this is what I was talking about before was if you work for an agency, hopefully they're going to have an organization. They're going to have all of this because it's a large organization. They'll have specialists, departments working on this. This is really, if you're going to be a independent contractor, open your own shop, something like that, you would need to have to do all this. And it is very, very time consuming. It's going to require attorneys and drafting. There's going to be a lot to it. But again, your company's organizations, institutions should have all this. And it also means you need to be aware of all that and up to date. And so we've talked about this before. When you go work for a company, there's employee manuals. Most people don't read them, but you should. They are held to be, in many courts, as sort of a contract, right? That's part of your contract. They publish it. It's like the laws, right? Just because you don't read the laws or what the law book said, the general laws in Massachusetts, just because you don't read them doesn't mean you can claim that they're not valid to you. It was posted. It was made available. You chose not to read it. Ignorance is not a defense. But yeah, they're often those employee handbooks about all these policy and procedures are viewed as part of your contract terms, right? Saying what you have to do. So, and this is repeated in the code. You need to stay up to date on your requirements, not only about the best practices in your field, right? New treatments, but also everything that goes along with this. And increasingly, as we can see, as things move more and more online, this is going to become a bigger and bigger issue. So this is something when you start working in the field, you're going to want to make yourselves familiar with there. And again, this just really goes, inform clients about, again, this just goes further. 1.07, subsection O just goes even further that you need to inform clients about these disclosures or hackings. And this here really says with applicable laws. Like I said, this is a very sticky and still developing legal field is data privacy and things like that. It's actually one of the growing fields. Amazingly, even though we have so much data out there digitally, it is in many ways a wild, wild west out there in terms of the laws, patchwork at best. So really need to go state by state. They're pretty good here in Massachusetts. Connecticut's been a leader in this, and so Massachusetts has followed a lot of it. But again, this is just things you need to be aware of. They're not necessarily stuff you're going to deal with every day. Like I said, there will be legal departments and that if you're working for agencies. But just be aware that, if you think you've been hacked, you need to go along and report these things up the chain of command, so to speak, and all of that. The other thing we've talked about here is confidentiality and the duty to protect or warn. And we've talked about this in the course before, but here is the Tarasoff court case, Tarasoff decision. I've talked about this here. This is about mandatory. What Tarasoff is when do you breach client self-determination? When do you breach client confidentiality? Because remember, neither of those are absolute, right? They do not have clients do not have a right to absolute confidentiality and privacy. Why not? Well, let's just deal with Tarasoff real quick. Tarasoff was a court case, and you can read this in there, in California, where a patient told a psychologist, a counselor at one of the University of California schools, that he was going to go and kill his, I believe it was his girlfriend. The psychologist, thought it was a legitimate and foreseeable and imminent threat, but because he thought he had to keep confidentiality, didn't do anything. Didn't warn the person, didn't warn the police, anything like that. Unfortunately, the third party was murdered by the psychologist client, and this set off, they could have stopped this, right, if they would have said something. So now what this case holds, and this is again, and what the court says, and there are some differences on state levels here, but most of them the same, is that the duty to protect is a professional requirement here, right? That you have to go and protect the client. You have an obligation to use reasonable care to protect the intended victim against such danger. And this coming from the court case itself. And so what would you do? You either warn the intended victim, inform others who are likely to apprise the victim of the danger, notify police, take other steps to, under the circumstances here. Again, this could be difficult because, as it points out on page 169, some of the worries here could be, what if you have clients who are just trying to talk out some of their violent thoughts? Maybe they had violent thoughts. They're not going to act on them. This is why your code book has the requirement of serious, foreseeable and imminent threats, right? So there are differences there. What makes it serious, imminent, and foreseeable is, how much do you believe them, right? People get hot-headed and say things, and they don't mean it, don't always mean it. Like if you cut me off again, I'll ram you with my car. You're really just mad, and it's conditional. You're not actually gonna go do it, right? It's if I say, you're my psychologist or whatever, a social worker, and I say, once I'm leaving here, I'm gonna go kill so and so, and I have a gun. You could see I'm not joking. You have a feeling. Then you have this duty to protect, and you can break confidentiality there. So what this really often turns on is how imminent is it, right? If I say if they do that again, again that can mean lots of things. Not everybody actually means that. Maybe they're just blowing off steam. So is it imminent? Is it foreseeable, right? If I say I'm going to go kill someone, and I say I got the gun and I'm going right there, that's probably foreseeable, right? So these can be very, very tricky here. But this is really something you have to take into account. And I would imagine this is really not something you're going to encounter that often, hopefully, there. And it will be clearer at times what happens, or whether or not it's truly serious, foreseeable, and imminent. But that is the standard. Remember that standard. It's been repeated multiple times in the class, that sort of thing. Other thing here, reporting mandatory rules and laws. This is, we've talked about mandatory reporting before. And certain people have to mandatory report, and especially if you look at go back a little bit to 158 to 159, child welfare and confidentiality, you will have to report things to Child Protective Services, others, and even though, as it says here, even though the details can vary from state to state, reporting requirements exist everywhere in the U.S. So here's the thing, though, is if you look at this, if you have a suspected child abuse in that, obviously it's something you're going to need to report, but do you just report it yourself? That's the question. If you look at it on page 158, they have these three options there. Preferably, we want the client, the person who's been abused, to report themselves. You can help them, you can follow up with them, that sort of thing, but we want them to make the report because it's them being impacted and carries weight there. Discuss with the family if there's a family, if they're not the ones, obviously abusing them, the client there, and get them to be a part of it as well, right? It shows support for the client. There's lots of reasons. The only time where you would really report without notifying the family is if you really do think there's an imminent, foreseeable, imminent, immediate risk to that child. And obviously, if you say, "Hey, we're going to report you. We think you're a child abusing," you never know what that person could do. Maybe they could, some awful things in between the time you go and report. But that should be the last resort, is where you don't notify the client or the family, and you report. Anyway, again, you try to get them involved in that, and you can see that on page 158 in the text there. All right, so now moving on to privileged communications, and this has to do with confidentiality. We'll actually pick this up in the fifth and final lecture video for Chapter 8, so I will see you there in a second. Thank you.